Okay, it's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, February 15th. I would like to call the council work session to order. Shannon, call the roll.
Mr. Scafidi?
Here.
Mr. Fury? Mr. Post?
Here.
Mrs. Walker? Present. Mrs. Labby? Here. Mr. Bellin?
Here.
Mr. Barr?
Okay, next we have our presentation on the comprehensive plan, and we'll have Mr. Larry Finch come up, please.
Thank you. Good evening, council. Hope everybody's in a good mood tonight.
So far.
Oh, I don't think we're going to mess it up here.
In an hour, we all will.
First of all, I wanted to have a recognition of the Comprehensive Plan Committee. It included a number of people, the mayor, some council people. They're listed on the first page of your handout, and also on the exhibit on the screen. We had boards and commissions representatives, the school, city staff, ward representatives, and of course the city administration. We had a dozen meetings throughout the year. We had a lot of discussions and a lot of contribution by a number of people that really helped us kind of come to grips with this whole idea of sustainability. Okay, so just kind of a quick update and status of comprehensive planning in the city of Twinsburg. We've done a number of comprehensive plans. The first one was done in 1975, and they've been updated in a number of years. We tried to do it within a 5 to 10 year update period. And in between those periods, when we did a comprehensive plan, other studies have been done. So, planning was not just done during the preparation of a comprehensive plan. There are a number of things that have been done since the last update. Among them include the mayor's ongoing green initiative, which has now been actually in 3 administrations. It started with just acquisition of open space and floodplains along Tinkers Creek, expanded to conservation space and environmentally conscious land development, and has continued now to be more involved in dealing with things like energy savings and efficiencies. It's resulted in things like, the electric vehicle charging stations we have now scattered throughout the city, lighting improvements, building improvements, garage doors, a whole host of other improvements. In the interim, we've also done a first mile, last mile connectivity study, which looked at the trail systems in the city and looked at ways to join those to make this a more walkable and sustainable community with more modes of opportunity for transportation. We've also taken a look at downtown redevelopment districts, and we will have some recommendations for downtown redevelopment districts and other special districts coming to council in the coming months. The city's considered and adopted an ESID and PACE program participation. Basically, that's a property that says clean energy opportunity where we can encourage businesses to invest in green energy, and the cost of that green energy improvement can be paid for through a assessed property process. So the last comprehensive plan was done in 2014. So what's different? What's changed since 2014? Well, a number of things. 2014 was as the Chrysler site was just being reconstructed. The 2.2 million square feet was being torn down. Now we have it's fully occupied in terms of buildings. Only about 100,000 square feet of leasable space remains in the whole area of more than 1 million square feet of actually, it's almost 2 million square feet of building space. Obviously, there's several employees at Cornerstone, but it still doesn't meet the the salary and revenue generation that the stamping plant had. Substantial changes occurred within the tax base of the city. The tax base, which was previously focused on manufacturing and primarily automotive parts production, those kinds of things, has transitioned now to be largely diversified, with our largest sectors being healthcare sectors, where our three largest employers are actually employed in the healthcare sector. Retail services have dramatically been impacted, of course, by COVID. That's going to be a change that we're going to see carried forward for who knows how long. Similarly, the work-at-home practices, which have essentially vacated our office spaces, will continue to affect us for some time. So a number of things have changed since 2014. And some of the trends that we noticed in 2014 are continuing to amplify themselves. For instance, reduced population growth. The city's running out of vacant developable property. As a consequence, we don't have residential lots being developed to the extent that they were previously. Our population continues to age. The average age in the city has increased, and it's expected to also continue to increase. The number of older Americans throughout the country is anticipated to more than double between 2010 and 2050. And the figures are there, 40 million to well over 85 million. Decreasing household sizes continue as millennials make different decisions based on their postponing marriage, postponing a family, looking at different types of home ownership. They're paying off college debt. They're more interested in lifestyle than raising a family or buying a house in some cases. So there are a number of changes as a result of their mindset. There is a substantially significant increase in the number of one-person households. In Twinsburg, 32% of the households are one-person households. Of course, we have a number of senior residence locations here, but that continues to increase through all sectors or all age groups within the community as well. The city is continuing to diversify with more Hispanic and more Asian proportions than what were existing here in the 2014 plan. And sadly, the poverty rate in the city has increased from 1% to 6% in 2019. So some of these trends are certainly going to have some impacts on us as we continue to look forward. The 2014 plan was basically a traditional plan. It considered basically as many aspects of the city as possible, including land use, but it concentrated primarily on redevelopment of the central area. It was sponsored by a grant. The downtown redevelopment study was sponsored by a grant from the Congress of New Urbanism. It involved a number of people, experts in the area, that cooperated in a workshop that involved more than 30 planners and other people from around the area and country. We developed a conceptual graphic plan for the central area, and goals and objectives were developed for a number of things, including housing, land use, community facilities, the economy, transportation, et cetera. So that brings us to the current 2021 plan, and the difference between the traditional plan and the sustainability plan is substantial. We recognize many of the goals and objectives in the 2014 plan. They are currently valid and have been carried forward to the 2021 plan. But the 21 plan considers sustainability in the context of national and global trends. We're trying to realize a growing community awareness of sustainability and take a look at redevelopment opportunities that go along with the sustainability objectives. Local sustainability objectives were considered using a framework that has been developed basically on the West Coast by the Institute of Local Government. Basically, it's a think tank of local government specialists. It involved constructing a baseline of greenhouse gas emissions using data from 2019 and using the US EPA's simplified greenhouse gas emissions tool. The goals and objectives were developed for a number of sustainability topic areas, and that was in keeping with the Institute for Local Government Actions framework for sustainability best practices. We concentrated on 10 areas within the framework. There are more, but we customized a couple of these because some of them didn't quite fit with our ability to deal with them. So a number of those, the types of practice areas that we were concerned with were things like energy efficiency and conservation, water and wastewater systems, green buildings, waste reduction and recycling, climate-friendly purchasing, renewable energy and low-carbon fuels, efficient transportation, land use and community design, open space and offsetting carbon emissions, and community and individual action. So during the Comprehensive Plan Committee workshops, we had participation by the committee members in each of these areas. We split off into groups. There were a number of discussions around the best practices that occurred within each area and evaluations as to what might be reasonable for us to consider adopting within the city of Twinsburg. Sustainability basically is nothing new to the city of Twinsburg. We've been involved in sustainable practices for a substantial period of time. I'd mentioned it's been something where at least 3 administrations here have been very much focused on environmentally friendly development and sustainability practices. It's dealt with things like acquiring the floodplains associated with Tinker's Creek, acquiring unique and significant habitat. And now we're turning to the Green Initiative and measuring greenhouse gas emissions. In 2009, shortly after Chrysler announced their closing, we were fortunate enough to conduct an energy audit, basically an energy conservation and building improvement study. That study identified a number of energy conservation potential opportunities. It established basically a blueprint for prioritizing energy improvements. That actually became much more important as we lost 12% of our revenue with the shutdown of Chrysler. So it provided the impetus for us to be more efficient and set energy conservation and cost savings as a primary objective within city operations. So it was in this environment that the interest in energy conservation and energy efficiency became more of a focus. And the Green Initiative elements turned more towards energy conservation, open space preservation, and efficient operation. And that was recognized in 2013 when we received the Summit of Sustainability Award in Summit County for the public sector category. That was a recognition of the work that had been done up to that time. That brings us to the present. Sustainability and the current plan update. This actually is building upon what's been previously accomplished through the Green Initiative by formalizing sustainability goals and objectives within the context of updating the comprehensive plan. One thing that involved that was very important for us to do was establish a greenhouse gas emissions baseline. This enables us to measure any progress we may make from this point to some point in the future when we do this again. It provided the opportunity for us to evaluate sustainability practices relative to current city operations and make suggestions and suggest measures to advance sustainability goals. And there was a particular emphasis on those that might have cost-saving potential. With regard to the greenhouse gas emissions calculation, it was done using 2019 city operations information. We used 2019 because it was prior to the COVID pandemic, when operational practices and living basically changed during the COVID pandemic. This was prior to that, so we wanted to make sure we had something as near a normal period as possible. And we used the US EPA Simplified Greenhouse Gas Emissions Calculator, which is a tool that's broadly recognized as a good tool for providing a reasonable yet not overly burdensome process to estimate greenhouse gas emissions. It's required a substantial amount of information to be assembled to use the greenhouse gas estimating tool. All utility bills that the city, every account that the city operates, whether it's gas, electric, whatever, were collected, and the meter information and the cost associated with the energy was accounted for. It included the amount of energy consumed and the billed cost for each account. We grouped the energy consuming facilities into basically two classifications. They were grouped into stationary sources, which are basically buildings, pump stations, things with a fixed location, traffic signals, signs, those kinds of things. And mobile sources, things like automobiles, mechanical equipment operated by the service department, and small tools and equipment that use gasoline and diesel fuel for their operations. So, okay, let me talk a little bit about stationary sources. They're basically they're fixed things like buildings, pump stations, lights, etc. Those stationary sources used more than 14 million cubic feet of natural gas in 2019. Over 4.8 million kilowatt hours of electricity were consumed by city operations. 48% of that was the wastewater treatment plant alone. Mobile sources included basically just gasoline and diesel fuel. There are other mobile sources, but they were so insignificant for us, things like bottled gases we really don't use a lot of. But gasoline and diesel fuel, we used over 108,000 gallons of those fuels. And each of those fuels, the consumption of those fuels results in greenhouse gas emissions. So what are the types of greenhouse gas emissions? Basically, greenhouse gas emissions are measured primarily against the standard of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is 80% of the volume of greenhouse gas emissions produced into the atmosphere. There are other greenhouse gas emissions other than CO2. Methane, for instance, is about 10% of the total amount of emissions generated by human activity by volume. However, it's 25 times more powerful than CO2 in terms of its harm to the environment. Nitrous oxide is another one. 7% of the total greenhouse gas emissions comes from nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is 300 times more powerful in terms of impact than carbon dioxide is. It also stays in the atmosphere for more than 100 years. Then lastly, fluorinated gases are generated in small quantities, primarily by human activity, manufacturing processes, or other things. And the fluorinated gases can remain in the atmosphere for hundreds or even thousands of years before they decay or absorbed by other natural causes. So they're basically those types of gases are greenhouse gas emissions. So in total, the contributions of greenhouse gas emissions by the city in the 2019 calendar year were more than 8,200 metric tons. Keep in mind, this is just for the city operations, directly related to city operations. It doesn't include the amount of greenhouse gas emissions from employees driving to and from the city in their automobiles. It includes nothing outside the city's control. This is just the physical operation of the city's plant itself. Just to give you an idea of what 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide is, if you were to imagine a 27 by 27 by 27 foot cube, that's about the height of a standard telephone pole. That is the volume of 1 metric ton of carbon of greenhouse gas. So multiply that times 8,200 plus, and that basically gives you some idea of what the scale of greenhouse gas emissions from something as small as the city of Twinsburg is. And try to imagine that multiplied the thousands and millions of times that would represent the rest of the state of Ohio, let alone the country as a whole. So we know now basically where we're at in terms of how much gas we generate. We've taken a look through the committee at various ways to deal with greenhouse gas emissions. And that's basically what this process was all about. With the participation of the committee, we developed a number of goals and objectives using that sustainable best practices framework as a guideline. Plan goals and objectives have been reviewed, submitted to the Environmental Commission and the Planning Commission for review. Also, a number of residents, some, 80, something like that, residents have written to the city supporting our efforts to reduce our carbon footprint. Those people, everybody who provided a letter to us, got a copy of the recommendations. And we tried to get an element of progress report in each of the mayor's monthly newsletters as we were ongoing. The full plan draft has been presented to the Planning Commission and considered by the Planning Commission for recommendation to council, and they did positively at the last Planning Commission meeting make a recommendation to council for consideration and adoption. And that's where we're at right now. So it's before you for your consideration. And basically, one more time to kind of get this across, the plan is a policy document, not a picture, not a physical plan for the community. It's just basically one step in promoting a more sustainable community and formalizing the city's position and commitment to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions. Some of the examples of the actions and objectives in the plan are indicated here. It can be very simple. Most of the things are straightforward and simply stated suggestions. Whoop, that was the wrong one. Sorry about that. Yep, one too far. See if we can hit the right button. They're simple. Sustainability Working Group. If the city were to establish a sustainability working group being represented by each city department, it would give the opportunity to think about different ways to be more sustainable. This has actually happened in the past. Many of the departments have done things like bought paper with certain recycled content as a policy within the department, or they've done their own recycling of their waste paper. Well, that's done now pretty much as a procedure throughout City Hall. But those kinds of things result from having a city that's thinking in each department about what can be done to make us a more sustainable practice, more sustainable community. Implementing a procurement policy. There's been some discussion in the past about having a procurement officer who would kind of oversee all city purchases. There are procurement officers that specialize in sustainability and sustainable procurement. It wouldn't have to be totally devoted to sustainable procurement, but would have a priority to acquire things with recycled content or purchase picnic tables that are made out of recycled, milk cartons, those kinds of things, in order to make a market for help make a market for some of these recycled materials. One of the biggest problems right now is while we send things to be recycled, because of a lack of market, they end up still going to a landfill someplace. So until there's a market for some of these recycled content materials, we may be wasting our time with sending these things, putting them in a recycle bin. So one way to encourage that it actually works is by help supporting the market. Something as simple as reforesting. Some areas of city-owned property where it might be currently in grass. We don't need to be cutting that grass. That burns energy and takes time for staff. If it were reforested or let grow to wild, natural vegetation, it would be an improvement both from an environmental perspective and from a physical energy consuming perspective. Making sustainability central to our culture and our brand, basically tying the sustainability thing to the city's naturally beautiful tagline in our logo. That might help reinforce the idea of sustainability. Of course, bigger things like looking for opportunities to incorporate green energy in any improvements we might be undertaking in the future, or looking for ways to finance those. So these are just a couple of examples. If you go through the document, you'll see many suggestions, recommendations, and many goals and objectives. What the city really must take the lead on promoting the adoption of sustainable practices. I don't see the resident population stepping up unless there's some encouragement. I know some people are adamant about it, individuals, and we know we have support in the community for more sustainable practices and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but the same people who write to us are not necessarily willing to eat one less meal with meat in it a week, or to walk someplace instead of drive, or to recycle truly. It must be promoted and reinforced, and the city can take the lead in doing that. And the adoption of these goals and recommendations, this is basically just a starting point. If any progress is to be made, there has to be some assignment of responsibility and accountability. It'll be necessary to set in place some procedures, things like a procurement officer, and things of that nature are going to be necessary to really make this work. And it will need to be promoted. These types of practices should be promoted to more than just city departments. Should be promoted to the residents, to businesses operating in the community. Actually, there are several businesses in the community who are far ahead of the city in their adoption of sustainable practices. So really, everyone's got to play a role, whether it's just something as simple as recycling or composting in your own yard, buying an electric vehicle, eating less meat, something simple, whatever. Everybody can contribute in some way every day with what they do in their lives. So that this document is basically, the whole purpose of this document is to basically formalize sustainability as a practice within the city operations and to encourage sustainability and less greenhouse gas production and emissions throughout the city, including both with residents and companies. So that's basically the two-bit summary of this version of the comprehensive plan. You're not going to see a graphic concept plan, obviously. So if you're only going to look at a graphic plan and then criticize things based on that, this is going to do you no good. You have to look at the trends. You have to look at the recommendations and the logic behind them, and if they ring true to you, I hope you can support this effort. And that's all I have. So it's open for questions. There's a lot we didn't cover because it's a fairly good-sized document, and there are a number of recommendations. That's why we kind of pushed it off to more administrative implementation and being a policy plan, where the policy has to be clarified based on administrative action. Any questions, or is there anything I can help clarify?
Yeah, you had mentioned in one of your slides there, Larry, about, first of all, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. You had mentioned in there opportunities for reforestation around the city. Have you identified any of those locations?
Well, we know that there are a number of places where we could do that. We haven't mapped them out yet.
Okay.
It could be something as simple as McTurnian Parkway, letting the grass grow closer to the street.
Okay.
That kind of thing. Less mowing in several areas that we currently mow. There are a number of those places throughout the city.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you had included, I saw the walkability scores
Yes.
in there, which we are very, very low in
Yes.
comparison.
Right.
And I'll admit that I have not read through every single page of the plan, but are those low walkability scores kind of high on the list in terms of going into any sort of plan moving forward that we would like to implement?
Well, a lot of what we've done reinforces what we're trying to do in the central area.
Mm-hmm.
Mixed use, walkable, that kind of thing. And we're looking into downtown redevelopment districts. We're looking into a number of special districts that would help do a couple of things for us. And like I said, we'll be coming back to you very shortly with some suggestions for those special districts.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
You can always give Lynn or I a call if you have any questions or have any suggestions or recommendations. We hope that we can encourage the council to adopt the plan in some measure. And we hope to be talking to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you,
both.
Larry.
And the committee. Anybody have anything they want to discuss right now?
I guess I have a question for Mayor, Mr. Vazana. Does the adoption of this, what is our path forward in terms of adopting this plan?
I just think, like we've done in the past, the council would adopt that as the current comprehensive plan. Again, this is focused on sustainability and some efforts that, as Larry said, establishing policy within the city that can guide the community, guide the city in terms of reducing our carbon footprint and then really setting an example. These are things, it was a difficult comprehensive plan. I mean, the discussions aren't your typical ones that were had in the past, but I think it's a very proactive type measure that the city's taking to look at really what we can do as a whole with just our employee base and our own operations to hopefully then, at least set an example and, start something within the community.
Okay, so is it fair to say then that adoption of this plan then would be used as a framework for whether it be contracts or development or what have you moving forward? Just to, essentially what we're saying is we agree that sustainability should be of importance as we redevelop or develop Twinsburg moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, we run into it a lot of times just in basic city operations where it may be lights on a ball field, on Glenwood Meadow Park, just for example. The easy solution would be to just replace those with the current type lights, which are inefficient, more costly, but more proactive, but in terms of sustainability, would be to replace the actual fixtures with LEDs and start changing those things over, like we've done at City Hall. I mean, all of our city renovations, which, there's currently every winter, everything gets switched over to LED. We try to do things for energy efficient purposes. Larry mentioned the grants that we get every year. We try to do something with those grants, again, to reduce the amount of energy that we're using here at the city, and then making us reducing our carbon footprint. So those are things that kind of happen. So it's kind of setting that policy and having that understanding and support from council that as we look at those things, that understanding that to do this, for long-term energy savings, there's typically an upfront cost.
It's going to cost up more upfront.
The same thing when we put up solar heating at the outdoor pool. There was an upfront cost to putting in what we did there. We had a small grant, I believe, but long run, that saves us money. Same thing with the microturbine at the wastewater treatment plant. That's taking, gas emissions and converting it back into energy.
Thank you.
If I may, the kind of policies and things, the goals and recommendations and the considerations within the plan, Lynn just reminded me. I mean, these things contribute to whenever we go after a grant. These are the kinds of things that help support our competitiveness in receiving grants, particularly those that might be related to those kinds of energy efficiency improvements that we, typically want to try to get.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else?
Yes.
Daisy.
Yes, hi. Hi. We recently replaced our light bulbs, low wattage, and our light bill went down significantly. I can't tell you whether it was 50%, but it was very low. And I just want to ask, are there any grants for residents, maybe seniors, that we could help them buy light bulbs?
Larry, can you
At a
come talk?
discount?
Can you come to the mic? Thank you.
Now, I'm not familiar with any grants that would directly go to a homeowner. I know Ohio Edison in the past has done promotions where they distributed LED bulbs in an energy efficiency package with, other things like shower heads that are low flow, shower heads, that kind of stuff. I know I'm not really aware of any grant that would specifically go to a homeowner to acquire more energy efficient products. It's basically a mindset and a cost differential that somebody needs to achieve or overcome.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Larry, I have a question. You know, when my sons played baseball, we used to joke that, you know, Liberty Field was a wind tunnel. Has there been any talk about putting like a windmill up there, or, you know, one of those
Turbine.
windmills?
Turbine, yeah.
Up there, because it always seemed like that was the windiest place in Twinsburg.
You know, we have discussed that in the past on a number of different occasions. The thing is, we are in a bat hibernacular. Bats don't fare very well around wind turbines, as do birds. So we were looking also at the vertical as opposed to horizontal wind turbine orientations. They're more animal friendly, don't kill quite as many birds, that kind of thing. But still are very expensive. So it's hard to justify a wind turbine because really when you look at it, we don't have that much wind. And they're so expensive to install. I mean, we could look at it that again, and that's one thing that we suggested that we do again is an energy audit that would help us identify some low-hanging fruit, perhaps, to like that might be implemented with a relatively short payback period.
Anybody else? Okay, we will move on to audience participation.
We have none.
We have none?
Nobody signed it.
Okay. Is there any miscellaneous at this time? Anybody? Okay. Well, Larry, again, thank you, and thank the committee, and Lynn, I'm sure you had a lot of input in it as well, so thank you so much. And Mayor, and we appreciate that. And that's it. If nobody has anything else, we will adjourn.
Thank you.